Imagine starting over every time you fail. Not just in a game, but in life itself. Like in the Groundhog Day, you are caught in a time loop, doomed to repeat a period of time over and over until you start experimenting, playing around with the people and the tools around you. Until finally, you correct the course. Welcome back to Arcade Axioms. I'm Rachel, and in today's episode, we will talk about permadeath, how it mirrors the concept of eternal return and what it can teach us. In the vast and ever-evolving landscape of video games, roguelike games stand out for their unique blend of challenge and unpredictability. The term roguelike is derived by the 1980 dungeon crawler, Rogue, as well as from other games with a similar concept, like 1987 NetHack and 1993 Angband. Early roguelikes were developed to be played on text-based user interfaces, commonly Unix-based computer mainframes and terminals used at colleges and universities before transitioning to personal computers. Games used a mix of ASCII or ANSI characters to visually represent elements of the dungeon levels, creatures, and items on the level. These games typically included one or two text lines presenting the player's current status at the bottom of the screen, and text-based menu screens to manage inventory, statistics, and other details. The player's character was nearly always represented by the @ character across text-based roguelikes, which had been chosen by the developers of Rogue to stand for where you're at. At the International Roguelike Development Conference 2008 held in Berlin, Germany, players and developers established a definition for roguelikes known as the Berlin interpretation. The so-called Berlin interpretation defined 9 high-value factors of the genre: random dungeon generation, permadeath, turn-based, grid-based, non-modal gameplay, emergent gameplay, resource management survival, hack-and-slash gameplay, world exploration. Many games with some of the Berlin interpretation elements call themselves roguelike, but bear little resemblance to the original Rogue, causing confusion and dilution of the term, which led to the introduction of the term roguelite or roguelike-like, to distinguish these games that possess some, but not all, of the Berlin interpretation features from those that exactly meet the Berlin roguelike definition. Now, I am not going to discuss here which games are roguelike and roguelite, because I believe that the distinction is very blurry. As a general rule, in a roguelike you lose all progression when you die, reset to 0. In a roguelite, instead, you carry over some stuff to the next run. Depending on the game, it could be weapons or certain power-ups or whatever. Regardless of the definition, 2 things are common between these game types for the purpose of this video. Number 1, these games are characterized by their procedurally generated levels. This means that every playthrough is different because it presents a new combination of challenges and opportunities, ensuring no 2 experiences are identical. The stakes in such environments are exceedingly high as players must navigate these unknown terrains under the constant threat of permanent failure. Number 2, a defining element of roguelike games is permadeath. This merciless feature means that the death of your character is permanent and leads to a total reset. There's no saving grace or second chances. Upon death, all progress is lost and players must start over from the very beginning. This mechanic mirrors the endless labor of the mythical Sisyphus, condemned to roll his boulder up a hill only for it to roll down each time he nears the summit, symbolizing eternal struggle without progress. This relentless cycle of death and rebirth in roguelikes serves a dual purpose. On one hand, it heightens the emotional intensity of the game as the player's decisions carry significant weight. On the other, it forces players into a continuous loop of learning and adapting. Each new attempt at the game becomes its own unique narrative, shaped by the lessons learned from previous failures. The player develops strategies, hones their skills, and gradually improves their mastery of the game's mechanics. Through this process, roguelikes teach a harsh but valuable lesson about persistence and resilience. Each restart is not just a reset, but a new beginning. An opportunity to apply what has been learned and perhaps go further than the last time. In this way, these games not only challenge the player's reflexes and tactical thinking, but also their ability to persevere and to learn from their experiences, turning each playthrough into a story of individual growth. The concept of permadeath reminded me the philosophical idea of the eternal return, as introduced by the late 19th century German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche suggests a profound and infinite cycle where life, as we know it, continuously recurs in a loop of identical instances. While Nietzsche was walking through the forest next to Lake Silvaplana in Switzerland, he came across a huge rock that stood like a pyramid. It was there that the idea of the eternal return came to him. The eternal return means that you would have to live the same life, with the same events and the same experiences, repeated for eternity. The concept makes its first appearance in his book, The Gay Science, in section 341 under the title, The Greatest Weight, where Nietzsche poses the hypothetical question of how you would react if a demon explained the eternal return to you with these words. This life as you now live it, and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more. Think about it for a moment. The idea is terrifying and paralyzing, as it carries the burden of the greatest weight imaginable. However, it is also the ultimate affirmation of life. It is the rock that fills the emptiness and weightlessness of nihilism. It is the reason to choose to live the life to the fullest. Think about the game, Darkest Dungeon, where players lead a band of heroes through treacherous dungeons with the aim of purging them of eldritch horrors. The game is unforgiving. Heroes suffer not only physical damage, but also psychological stresses that can result in afflictions such as paranoia, fear, or irrationality. Each foray into the dungeon is independent, and the layout of the dungeon, the placement of enemies, and the events encountered are procedurally generated, making each playthrough distinct yet under the same overarching challenge. This setup exemplifies Nietzsche's idea of eternal return in 3 ways. Number 1, repetition with variation. Like life's eternal return as proposed by Nietzsche, each dungeon in Darkest Dungeon represents a cycle that begins anew with each playthrough. The core experience, descending into a dungeon filled with danger, remains constant, but the details vary, reflecting Nietzsche's idea that we might live the same life over and over, but with opportunities for different outcomes. Number 2, existential struggle and resilience. Nietzsche's philosophy emphasizes the need to embrace life's challenges repeatedly with vigor, despite their repetitive nature. Similarly, in Darkest Dungeon, players must consistently manage their hero's stress and health, making strategic decisions about when to push forward and when to retreat, thus continuously adapting and strategizing anew in the face of familiar adversities. Number 3, learning and overcoming. The game teaches players to learn from past experiences, improving their management of resources like light and food, and their strategies in combat and stress management. This learning curve is akin to the philosophical journey Nietzsche describes, one where each iteration of life could be approached with new wisdom gained from previous iterations, allowing for different decisions and potentially better outcomes. Let's go deeper now into Nietzsche's eternal return and talk about the concept of will of power. The survival, according to Nietzsche, is not simply a struggle for existence and self-preservation, but is primarily a struggle for increased power. While the fittest is the superior individual, the free spirit is one who fights as a creative force and aims at the intensification of power. The 2 basic concepts of the will to power and the eternal return seem at first to contradict each other, the will to power symbolizing eternal development and the eternal return and eternal equality. Nietzsche himself sees no contradiction. He calls becoming a way of being, so they are compatible. This is best expressed in the famous quote from Heraclitus that symbolizes becoming and constant flow. Heraclitus writes, "No man treads the same river twice." The river is not only a symbol of becoming, but the sameness and repetition of movement is a form of being. In fact, Nietzsche states, the eternal return, this teaching of Zarathustra, could have already been taught by Heraclitus. And finally, life is a game. Nietzsche calls the cosmos the innocence of becoming. The world is an eternal play of dynamic forces, their tension and release, their passing away and their emergence. It is the eternal return of a will to create and destroy, to fight and expand. In the context of gameplay, each new session of a roguelike, while structurally familiar, is rendered unique by the ever-changing maze of challenges and opportunities it presents. This variability within a consistent framework mirrors the nature of life itself, unpredictable in its specifics, yet stable in its general contours. Players learn that while they cannot control the layout of the dungeon or the enemies they will face, they can control their responses and strategies. Over time, this leads to a refined approach to the game, where knowledge from previous runs is leveraged to make smarter, more effective decisions. The will of power of the player, we might say. The repeated attempts at these games often lead to a shift in how players approach not only gaming but challenges in real life. Players might start to see each new attempt not as a repeat of the last, but as a unique scenario that, although framed by similar rules and objectives, offers a new set of decisions and outcomes. This realization can shift a player's strategy from one that may be rigidly focused on a single perceived route to success to one that is more flexible and experimental, embracing the variety of options each new playthrough offers. Let's consider two other games now. The Binding of Isaac and Dead Cells serve as excellent case studies for this exploration due to their unique narratives and gameplay mechanics. The Binding of Isaac is a game steeped in biblical allegory, primarily drawing from the story of Abraham's near sacrifice of his son Isaac, a narrative fraught with themes of faith, obedience, and deliverance. In this game, players navigate Isaac through a series of dungeon-like levels that represent his mother's basement, where he hides to escape her murderous intent, driven by her perceived divine command. Each level in the game is procedurally generated, which introduces a layer of unpredictability and randomness that symbolically ties into the game's themes of fate and divine intervention. The element of permadeath in The Binding of Isaac heightens the stakes significantly, emphasizing the game's exploration of consequence. Every decision, from choosing which items to pick up to engaging with enemies, can have dramatic effects on the outcome of the game. This mechanic underlines the theme of fate, how seemingly random and chaotic elements can align to determine one's destiny, reflecting a complex negotiation between predestination and free will. On the other hand, Dead Cells exemplifies the process of progression through the lessons learned from past defeats. This game features a continually evolving world where each defeat serves as a learning experience. Players control a mass of cells that inhabit a corpse in a dungeon, battling their way through hordes of enemies. What makes Dead Cells particularly engaging is its integration of cells collected from fallen enemies, which can be used to purchase permanent upgrades. These upgrades carry over after death, which philosophically ties into the concept of growth through adversity. Each failure is not an end, but an opportunity for improvement and evolution. This mechanic speaks to a broader philosophical question about the nature of identity and progress. Are we the sum of our repeated efforts? And do our past failures contribute to our eventual successes? In Dead Cells, the answer is a resounding yes, as players build their strength and skills over numerous attempts, literally growing stronger from what has been left behind by past lives. At this point, you should have understood that Nietzsche has significantly influenced my thoughts. Thus, you'll have to bear with me for a few more videos of this kind. The beauty is that they will all return eternally. And it won't be thanks to YouTube, they will simply return, and you will either endure them or not, eternally. The choice is yours. Let's go deeper in the theory of the eternal return and its implication, and let's go back to Nietzsche's book, The Gay Science. Section 341. What if some day or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, "This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it. But every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small or great in your life will have to return to you. All in the same succession and sequence, even this spider and this moonlight between the trees, and even this moment and I myself. The eternal hourglass of existence is turned upside down again and again, and you with it, speck of dust. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, "You are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine"? If this thought gained possession of you, it would change you as you are, or perhaps crush you. The question in each and everything, do you desire this once more, and innumerable times more, would lie upon your actions as the greatest weight, or how well disposed would you have to become to yourself and to life? Time coils upon itself. Linear, whispers the demon, it transforms into circular. The first reaction, understandably human, is panic. Why do we react this way? Because the path we tread each of our lives always appears linear. Past, present, future, one step after another, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and it always seems we are moving toward something, aiming to achieve some goal. What goal? The salvation of the soul, once upon a time. Success, flavored in economic technological terms nowadays, a matter of perspective. Perspectives shift with historical epochs. Each era has its metaphysics. But God is dead. Houston, we have a problem. God is dead and remains dead, as announced by the madmen in another passage from The Gay Science, the famous aphorism 125. What does this mean? I'll explain in geometric terms. The timeline ceases to be a directed vector. It's no longer an arrow, not pointing anywhere, neither right nor left, nor up nor down, because there's no specific point on the horizon to aim at. It's a line, if you want to consider it so, in its simple geometric nudity. And you know, a line quickly bends and, proceeding towards infinity, closes on itself, melding with itself in an embrace that tastes of eternity. Where did it start? Where has it arrived? What is the beginning and what the end? This is the conception of circular, eternalizing time, typical of ancient cultures. But Nietzsche, who is in love with the Greeks, has a precise model in mind. The great year of the Stoic philosophers, inspired by the Heraclitean conception. This world order, the same for all, no God made or any man, but it always was and is and will be an ever-living fire, kindling by measure and going out by measure. Thus Heraclitus stated in Fragment 50, the reason for the whole is not outside the world, not something extraterrestrial. I beseech you, brothers, remain faithful to the earth, Zarathustra implored. No further reason then. The cosmos, as Heraclitus says, is fire that at due times ignites and at due times extinguishes. It returns to itself, seeks no further meaning, nor tends towards a transcendent God because it is entirely autonomous. The cosmos is divine, nature is God, as Spinoza, another philosopher dear to Nietzsche, said. Thus we can well do without the God of the Old Testament. But to see circularity, as the ancients said, requires elevation. Without elevation, you can't produce that view from above that allows you to see the whole of which you are a part. You need eagle eyes to contemplate the great wheel of time, the curve that eternally bends and eternally returns. But above all, you need an eagle's stomach to digest this vision, because suddenly the veil is torn and it's revealed to you that things are as they are. And that things as they are, using a phrase borrowed from the common Buddhism of French writer Hervé Clerc, includes your life, your fate, your daemon. And look, you must accept it as it is. You can't do without it, you can't withdraw from this task. Life must be accepted as it presents itself. Lame, imperfect, depressing, enthusiastic, mad, dreadful. Got it? Do you understand what burden Nietzsche Zarathustra speaks of? Raise your hand if you can live every moment of your life loving what heaven, so to speak, sends you here and now. Who has such a strong stomach to endure such a vision? Maybe we can do it for a few seconds, for a minute. Maybe a sufficiently evolved Zen monk can manage for a few hours, but not us. We need to catch our breath. We immediately go into apnea. And here we are, diving back into the neurosis of fleeting time that does not return, of a future that never arrives, a future that today is flattening, accelerating ever faster into a present made of consumption, ringtones, entertainment, stupefaction, quiet desperation. To free ourselves with a shout, there is only here and now, hic et nunc. Tomorrow is now, yesterday is now. Now everything will return, now everything has returned, now everything returns. The meaning of the world is in the world, and it is precisely this perspective senselessness, this unsatisfied hunger for meaning that you are feeling at this moment. Make peace with it. There's nothing else. Well, yes, love. Love, which does not mean mere acceptance, but being in the here and now with open eyes, embracing this here and now. It is that feeling that the Stoics called amor fati, love of fate, and that Spinoza named amor dei intellectualis, intellectual love of God, knowing how to be in the whole as part of the whole. It leaves you stunned. Absolutely, this is the ultimate seal, having to put yourself in the place of God, having to renounce God. Alas, it's a crushing responsibility. Did I make myself clear? Do you feel this weight too? Having to put yourself in the place of the Father, who will you blame now? You are father and mother at the same time. Try to grasp the eternity contained in this moment. It will slip away like sand through your fingers. But it's there. There. Only there. I'll stop here. Let's give the floor to Friedrich Nietzsche. The passage I read and comment on is from the third part of Thus Spoke Zarathustra and is titled The Vision and the Riddle. For courage is the best slayer, courage which attacks. For in every attack there is playing and brass. Man, however, is the most courageous animal. Hence he overcame every animal. With playing and brass he has so far overcome every pain. But human pain is the deepest pain. Courage also slays dizziness at the edge of abysses. And where does man not stand at the edge of abysses? Is not seeing always seeing abysses? Courage is the best slayer. Courage slays even pity. But pity is the deepest abyss. As deeply as man sees into life, he also sees into suffering. Courage, however, is the best slayer. Courage which attacks, which slays even death itself, for it says, was that life? Well then, once more. In such words, however, there is much playing in brass. He that has ears to hear, let him hear. Stop, dwarf, I said. It is I or you. But I am the stronger of us two. You do not know my abysmal thought, that you could not bear. Then something happened that made me lighter, for the dwarf jumped from my shoulder, being curious, and he crouched on a stone before me, but there was a gateway just where we had stopped. Behold this gateway, dwarf, I continued. It has two faces. Two paths meet here. No one has yet followed either to its end. This long lane stretches back for an eternity. And the long lane out there, that is another eternity. They contradict each other, these paths. They offend each other face to face. And it is here at this gateway that they come together. The name of the gateway is inscribed above, Moment. But whoever would follow one of them, on, farther and farther, do you believe, dwarf, that these paths contradict each other eternally? All that is straight lies, the dwarf murmured contemptuously. All truth is crooked. Time itself is a circle. You spirit of gravity, I said angrily, do not make things too easy for yourself, or I shall let you crouch where you are crouching, lame foot. And it was I that carried you to this height. Behold, I continued, this moment. From this gateway moment, a long, eternal lane leads backward. Behind us lies an eternity. Must not whatever can walk have walked on this lane before? Must not whatever can happen have happened, have been done, have passed by before? And if everything has been there before, what do you think, dwarf, of this moment? Must not this gateway too have been there before, and are not all things knotted together so firmly that this moment draws after it all that is to come? Therefore, itself too? For whatever can walk, in this long lane out there too, it must walk once more. And this slow spider, which crawls in the moonlight, and this moonlight itself and I and you in the gateway, whispering together, whispering of eternal things, must not all of us have been there before? And return and walk in that other lane out there, before us in this long, dreadful lane, must we not eternally return? Thus I spoke more and more softly, for I was afraid of my own thoughts and the thoughts behind my thoughts. Then suddenly I heard a dog howl nearby. Had I ever heard a dog howl like this? My thoughts raced back. Yes, when I was a child, in the most distant childhood. Then I heard a dog howl like this, and I saw him too, bristling his head up, trembling in the stillest midnight when even dogs believe in ghosts, and I took pity, for just then the full moon, silent as death, passed over the house. Just then it stood still, a round glow, still on the flat roof, as if on another's property. That was why the dog was terrified, for dogs believe in thieves and ghosts. And when I heard such howling again, I took pity again. Where was the dwarf gone now? And the gateway and the spider? And all the whispering? Was I dreaming then? Was I waking up? Now I die and vanish, you would say. And all at once, I am nothing. The soul is as mortal as the body, but the knot of causes in which I am entangled recurs and will create me again. I myself belong to the causes of the eternal recurrence. I come again with this sun, with this earth, with this eagle, with this serpent, not to a new life or a better life or a similar life. I come back eternally to this same self-same life. This text, reading it deeply, gives you the chills. You feel your skin crawl. It takes a lot of courage, a heap of courage, to bear the pressing torrent of Nietzschean arguments and metaphors, the courage that becomes a club against compassion. Because yes, it's true, at first finding oneself personally involved in Zarathustra's vision, one feels compassion for oneself, a compassion that leads to victimhood. Can such a heavy burden be carried? Let's talk about the origin of this text. We mentioned it already at the beginning of this video. It was the summer of 1881. Friedrich Nietzsche, who was then 37 years old, was in Switzerland in Silvaplana. He had moved there for health reasons, but above all to seek solitude and inspiration. It is a mountain village near a beautiful lake where Nietzsche loves to walk in the afternoon, while in the evening, just back in his chalet, he writes down what he has been ruminating during the walk. It's a magnificent way to do philosophy. I recommend it. Another great philosopher, a bit younger than Nietzsche, Thoreau, also talks about it in a famous little book titled Walking. By getting the body moving in contact with nature, thoughts germinate fresher, more fruitful, and deeper. But anyway, during a walk, Nietzsche is struck by this image of time, the image of eternal return, which he discusses in this famous passage from Thus Spoke Zarathustra. It's an image taumatic. To use the Hellenic manner, it generates in him a talma, a feeling of wonder that unsettles, frightens, and enchants him at the same time. You remember talma? We talked about it in my previous video on Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. Here is the autobiographical testimony of the event from Ecce Homo, 1888. Now I will tell the story of Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The fundamental conception of the work, the thought of the eternal return, this formula of affirmation which is the highest that can be attained, is from August 1881. It is jotted down on a slip of paper with the note written below, at 6,000 feet beyond man and time. That day I was walking along Lake Silvaplana through the woods, near a massive rock that stood up like a pyramid not far from Surley. I stopped. There came this idea. So, as I said before, it takes courage to bear this vision and translate it into words. But at the same time, it is a liberating practice. The dwarf that Zarathustra Nietzsche carries on his shoulders while climbing a mountain path. Who knows if while writing these words he didn't have in mind the magnificent sceneries of Silvaplana represents the spirit of gravity. Do you have it in mind? They are the chains of habit, the grayish pettiness of everyday life, the chatter of our ordinary mind that indeed pulls us down. But we can't throw it away because it's a part of us and in a sense we need it. So like Zarathustra, we must carry it on our shoulders. But here the vision manifests. Was this life? This is life. All right, once more. Forward. To hell with it. It's fine like this. I want to say yes to this life. I want to say yes to it as it is. I don't regret anything. There's nothing to regret. I have no more sense of guilt. If I have to die, I will die light. To hell with it. No more burden on my shoulders. What I have done, what I have lived, what I am living, I can't not do it. I would do it 100, 1,000 times. I would do it infinitely many times because it's my fate and I am my fate. Got it? Did you really get it? This is amor fati. This means becoming what one is, embracing one's fate. This is the essence of Zarathustra's teaching. I, Zarathustra, teach you to become men who know how to go beyond, here in this metaphorical context, the meaning of Superman. That is, who know how to put into practice here and now the Delphic commandment, that of Apollo Dionysus, which thus reads, Man, know yourself, know your limits, man, become what you are. So Zarathustra teaches us how one becomes what one is. Not by chance, amor fati and eternal return constitute the essence of Zarathustra's teaching. Behold, you, Zarathustra, are the master of the eternal return. See, we know what you teach, that all things eternally return and we with them, and that we have already been eternal times and all things with us. You teach that there is a great year of becoming, an immensity of great year. It, like an hourglass, must always again be turned over to be able to always again flow and finish flowing. When you realize this thing here, when you feel it dancing inside you, when you feel your stomach upside down, suddenly, as Zarathustra says, you feel like dancing, your feet move on their own, you hear the music, and others think you're mad because they can't hear it. But you have it inside, call it Dionysus, call it nature, call it life, if you like. You are not yet dead, at least you are not dead inside. And then you know it was worth it. It was worth it anyway. And for what remains for you to live, it is worth it. Because there's nothing else, nothing to achieve, no goal to seize, no forgiveness to beg for. Life is simply what it is. Now that the frenzy has stopped burning you inside, you can breathe deeply, good air and health. This is why the vision takes place along alpine pastures and mountain paths. The timeline has not broken, it continues, but it curves on the horizon. And you, finally, are able to see it as it curves. Beyond the gateway, you see it running away in one direction and imagine it coming back from the other. The secret lies in the gateway, the one on which the word moment is written in letters of fire. In the original German, Augenblick. Augenblick is a wonderful word. Literally, it means blink of an eye. The secret of time is right there in the blink of an eye, or to apply one of the principles of anapanasati meditation, in the breath. Focusing on the breath that comes in and goes out is a way to stay in the present, to grasp the present, which is the place of manifestation of the real, that is, of things as they are. In the present moment, if you want to leaf through it petal by petal, lies the secret of eternity. It's an ancient teaching which goes from east to west, from the highlands of northern India, to the slopes of the Himalayas, to the sunny Hellas, so dear to Nietzsche, from the ancient yoga tradition to the Buddhist practice, from the spiritual exercises of the Hellenistic schools to those of the late imperial period. The Nietzschean model, as well as the idea of the eternal return of the same, is very likely of Stoic derivation. The eternal return is, at the same time, a cosmological theory and a conception of life. To think of time means to shape one's vision of the world and to regulate one's life choice on it. Whether one is aware of it or not, I live in the way I conceive the world. To this maxim there is no escape. This is why whoever controls the calendar, that is the conception of time and collective and individual history, exercises the supreme form of power. Time is divine. For Heraclitus, it is the eon playing with knucklebones by the sea under the Mediterranean sun. In the Judeo-Christian conception, time belongs to God. It begins with Genesis and the creation of Adam, is marked by kings and prophets, will culminate with the coming of the Messiah, the return to the promised land. Or, if we believe that the Messiah, the Christ, is Yeshua ben Yosef, Jesus, the end of time, will be determined by his apocalyptic return, the final unveiling, the universal judgment. That's why the Christian waits. He craves the infinite, feeds on future time, lives suspended between this world and the world to come, the world behind the world of which Zarathustra speaks, in the chapter dedicated to the poisoners of the soul, priests, and priest-like figures. But God is dead, and with the great deceased has disappeared the overworld of the Platonic tradition, the schizophrenia of the body-tomb Orphic, or machine Cartesian, at the service of the immortal soul. The eternal return is the keystone of a secular, terrestrial, natural spirituality, based on the experience of the present moment. No immortality, no dualism. Everything returns eternally, this sunset, whether it is the first or the last. This half-full glass of wine, this feeling of churning bowels. If you like, it is there, near the gateway, where we can really meet. I who look into the eyes of the other. The I who in the eyes of the other sees himself reflected like Dionysus Zagreus, the child god, who looking into the mirror glimpses the world of phenomena. The gateway of which Zarathustra speaks, then, is the cipher, the symbol of a new conception of the world which we have defined perspectivism. Perspective or escape route, forward, backward. But it's not all relative, it's not about relativism, because in the end, from somewhere, all perspectives merge into a single fire. It's not given to us to see it if we imagine it distant and elevated. In reality, we have it before our eyes. It's the gateway, precisely it. Augenblick, the eternally fleeting moment. Life, now! But the eternal return is also a mind-boggling astrophysical vision, enough to make even science fiction visionaries like Philip K. Dick tremble. Let's hear what Nietzsche says in a posthumous fragment from 1881. The measure of the cosmos's force is determined, not infinite. Let's beware of these excesses of the concept. Consequently, the number of positions, changes, combinations, and developments of this force is certainly immense, and in essence not measurable. But in any case, it is also determined and not infinite. It's true that the time in which the cosmos exercises its force is infinite. That is, the force is eternally equal and eternally active. Up to this moment, an infinity has already passed. That is, all possible developments must already have existed. Consequently, the momentary development must be a repetition, and so what generated it, and what springs from it, and so on, forward and backward. Everything has existed innumerable times, since the overall condition of all forces always returns. In other words, suppose that however immense, the energies of the cosmos are not infinite. They can't be because the whole is all and the sum of the whole, as modern cosmogonic theories teach us, is zero. I'm thinking of a book by Guido Tonelli, one of the hunters of the famous Higgs boson. The title of the book is Genesis, the Great Narrative of the Origins. All possible conditions considering infinite time have already been given and will eternally be given. So think about it, infinite time and finite causal and spatial configurations. All ontological and ontogenetic configurations within the well-rounded sphere of Parmenides are present to themselves. They happen, have happened, will happen. Present, past, future are nothing but perspectives, escape routes of the same spherical reality that turns on itself. Come on, think about it well. You don't just have to intuit things, you have to see them. Plato was right about this, so let's resort as usual to geometry. Take a circle, indicate with A the beginning of the circle and with B its end. Well, every point is A and B. Have you seen? With a straight line or with rectilinear figures, those that according to the dwarf lie, you can try to mark with A and B different points, you can try to make the Pallidi Achilles run after the Zeno-like tortoise. So the conditions of the whole must sooner or later reconfigure and present themselves as they configure and present themselves in this Augenblick. No matter how long it will take, we have an eternity and change. In India, this circular figure is called Dharma Chakra, Wheel of Dharma, or Wheel of the Universal Law. For us who are the grandchildren of the Greeks, it is the fundamental law of the cosmos, the logos of Heraclitean memory. In this speech, those more attentive among you will certainly have noticed Heraclitus also returns constantly. So permadeath is a nice solution to solve problems, but does the prospect of returning eternally in the same way one has lived excites you or not? The other alternatives are those of disappearing into nothing, a linear conception of time, or better, of dispersing into everything. Or if you like ancient myths, the survival in the form of a soul which flies away in the sky like Plato's winged chariot, or yet the eschatological resurrection at the end of times. What times? Soul and body together to be sent to heaven or hell, provided that we are not already in hell. Permadeath is only one face of the prisma. Choose for yourself. The only certainties are that we must die, and that before dying it would be a good idea to live. So it's up to us to decide how to live, what to do with our lives. And with this, since, in honor of Nietzsche's Zarathustra, I too want to be a bit wicked, I leave you to fend for yourselves. Thanks for watching. Please leave your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thoughtful content. Happy mindful gaming, and see you next time!